This is a continuing part of the CXO Challenge on the iTnews podcast. I'm your host, Ry Crozier, Editor-in-Chief of iTnews. On the show this week are Suzanne Nottage, Executive Manager of Technology Enablement, and Sheryn Crummy, Manager of Technology Capability Development, both with Australian-headquartered insurer IAG. Together, Suzanne and Sheryn share the work they've been doing to offer new technology skills to people from across the organisation, and particularly in key business-critical projects. We begin with Suzanne describing the role of technology enablement at IAG. Please enjoy the conversation. It'd be useful just to understand a little bit more about the area of technology enablement within IAG and also more broadly about IAG's IT organisation in terms of the size and remit, if you were able to give me a bit of a sense of that.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Ry. So technology and operations is made up of around 2,000 people. We're actually going through a reorg, so I don't have the exact numbers. And that's part of IAG, which is the largest insurer in Australia and New Zealand with around 13,000 people. So in the Australia-New Zealand context, we're one of the bigger IT organisations out there. Technology enablement, the clue is kind of in the title there. So it's about enabling technology. Technology was the old name for our tech and ops organisation. So how do we set the whole of technology up for success to deliver effectively on our strategy with the people front of mind? So the people in two ways. One is around how we work. So that's things like scaled agile and introducing a system of work so that value can effectively flow through from strategy to execution. And the second is around capability uplift. So that's where Sheryn's team comes in. So thinking around future workforce, future tech skills, and how do we enable our people and our teams and our leaders with those skills and capabilities, again, so that we can deliver our strategy effectively.
How long has technology enablement as a function within the broader technology team existed?
It's a relatively new function, and that doesn't surprise me on two counts, because I think the conversations that we have around both strategic uplift of our people skills and capabilities and also how we work are relatively new conversations at the senior leadership table. So, 10 years ago, we weren't talking about these things in the same way that we do today, but more and more companies are recognizing the strategic advantage associated with having the right skill set. It's a competitive market out there to get people in technology. So having Sheryn's team in-house means that we can grow that skill set internally, and it means that people can develop their careers in-house. So the team itself has only existed for about 2 years, and in the current reorg, our remit is actually being expanded so that we're not just technology, but we've got more of an enterprise focus as well.
On that reorganisation, how will that expand the remit? How will it expand the size of your team? But presumably it will also take you across non-technology functions. And
I hope so. Yes.
I hope so. Okay.
Yeah. So again, I think more and more around the board table, people are realizing that what was previously referred to as the business and technology are not two separate entities, and that value needs to flow end to end across the organization rather than just having a focus on the business or just having a focus on technology and having that artificial silo. So moving more towards having an enterprise focus recognizes that very fact. So it enables us to have a broader reach across the organization, and therefore it allows the value that we potentially offer to be extended to a whole set of new people as well.
And are you still talking about digital skills predominantly, or are you talking about other skills as well?
It's all of the above, and I'll hand over to Sheryn in a minute. But in a technology organisation, you've got a mix of super technical people, and you've got a mix of also non-technical people and some people who are in between. So I'll hand over to Sheryn to talk more about the details of how we serve those different groups as well as our leaders.
Yeah, and we will touch on this in a little while as well, Ry, when we talk further about not only the 30 DDC, but the evolution of the different events that we have done and what's next. Since I took on the job, which was, when was that?
January
last year. Just before COVID hit. So it's changed quite a lot. But originally, and what we've seen the focus being for our tech teams around technical uplift and technical capability has been the areas which I'm sure you're familiar with, things like cloud, things like agile, DevOps, Kubernetes, digital UI, UX. I can throw these names around quite a lot if I needed to. But what we're seeing more and more now that the operations part of the business has also come into ours, it's things like, how do we understand risk management? How do we understand analytics and data? How do we think about the way that we can focus on machine learning, cybersecurity? All of these things are making up a really forward-thinking technical and operations organization. And what we're also seeing is an abundance of people wanting those true human skills. So those skills which enable them to actually lead better, to be better team members, to be ready for anything and to grow a growth mindset. And that's actually really encouraging as somebody who's spent a lifetime in HR, learning and development talent teams and leading large talent teams and consulting and all sorts. Having people focus on and wanting to actually be the best leader, team member and employee for an organization is actually really, it's great to see, and it's very unusual, to be honest. And I think the support of the Tech and Ops leadership team, right from the beginning of Tech Enablement coming on board, is such that people know that they are able to learn. And if they are willing to put the time and the effort in to develop themselves, and then to actually utilize those skills that they learn in their day-to-day jobs, they can do whatever they like and they can be ready for anything that's going to come from the new technology and operations organization.
Maybe it's a good chance to talk about the 30-day development challenge that I understand that you did last year. Are you able to just give us a sense of what it was, what it entailed, and sort of what the overarching goals were?
Yeah, absolutely. So the 30-day development challenge was originally planned as an on-site event with guest speakers and conferences and all sorts of things happening across the business. And then, of course, COVID happened. And so my team and I had only just taken on the team for the first, literally, I'd been in the team for about 3 months. My team pivoted incredibly quickly and came up with this fantastic, it ended up being about 5 weeks, but it was actually 30 days.
30 working days.
30 working days of absolute focus on development. Our goal really was to answer the questions, how do we set up our technology team members, like our customers, our team's customers, to understand what it takes to lift their capability in 3 areas. It's around becoming the future workforce. It's about building a performance and learning culture, and it's about how do we experience and grow uplift in technical skills across the teams to deliver on the technology strategy. So 30DDC dedicated the month of May to events, personal, professional development sessions, collaborative capability uplift across the technology team. And what we got out of it was we had every single week, we had an executive leader sponsor the event. They got incredibly excited and they all got very competitive as to who was going to have the most people attending their events. So the 4 things we focused on were this. Week 0, actually 5 things. Week 0 was all about setting yourself up for success, reflecting on what it is you want to focus on for your learning come the next 6 months, and what do you want to be a part of during the 30DDC. So week 1 was about future me. What skills and capability do I have now? And what skills and capability will I need in the future to develop and to really grow my career at IAG? And we had 21 events over a 5-day period. We saw an attendance of over 1,650 people across those 21 events. We had speakers, we had a guest speaker from Deloitte come on and talk about his squiggly career and the various things that he'd done throughout his career. We took people on a journey into the emerging future and how we were well on our way of creating it and what they could do to take action and be part of that. And we did it all using capabilities and ways of working that we really wanted to grow across the business. The second week then was about the social learning aspect. So how do we uplift learning across the organisation using things like our academies? We have guilds focused on various different communities, and we have other things which we call people and purpose initiatives, PPIs. How do you use those in your day-to-day job to actually achieve what you want to achieve? We saw three main areas through that week, which was human-centered design. Things like Toastmasters, we had fantastic Toastmasters sessions where people actually got up on their calls and did speeches for a minute and had a huge competition around it. We focused on agile, diverse, safer communities, which is something that we focus on very much in IAG. And it really opened people's eyes to the networks which were available among them to get further information from and to learn and be coached and be mentored by people. And week 3 was the interesting one. Week 3 was Head in the Cloud. And Head in the Cloud really was supposed to be a one-day conference off-site somewhere in Sydney, Melbourne, Auckland, all across our sites in Australia and New Zealand. And obviously that changed. So it became 1 week focused on upskilling, educating, and getting our people on board with everything that we need to be a cloud-based organisation from a technology perspective. We had 46 events over 5 days, which is quite a lot. AWS supplied their time, as too did Azure, as too did ServiceNow and Google. We saw a resulting uplifting capability and certification of cloud certifications varying across the plethora of certifications of 10% across that week. And it's actually grown our Cloud Academy further as well to allow us to now see great numbers which are coming out of there. And then the final week was I don't know if you know the change management term, WIFM, the what's in it for me. It was all about what's in it for me, turning it into action, because it's fantastic to learn things, but if you don't apply them, what's the point? And WIFM was all about how do you take ownership of your career and how do you drive it forward, because ultimately you own your career and no one's going to help you with it if you don't help yourself. We had 18 events that week. It was getting to know and be comfortable with the unknown, letting people know that they weren't starting from scratch, and there was a lot of material and information out there. Really powerful personal stories, and we had a great mini development challenge plan to help people to create really powerful development plans. And what we saw as an outcome of all of this was that the 30 DDC has allowed our people to grow micro habits. Those small, simple activities don't require much time, they don't require much financial investment, but they help to build a larger goal for each of us while actually sparking a psychological phenomena called behavioural momentum. And I think that was very much needed, particularly given we were in the midst of COVID, we're in the midst of lockdown, and people were looking for something to engage with outside of the norm. What we also managed to do, and I think this is very, very, it comes out very strongly when you look at the learning hours that we're now seeing. We've managed to build awareness and a desire for our people to be part of a performance and learning culture. And really, it showed, as I mentioned, the tech team, the ability they have to own their careers and the ability they have to drive their own capability uplift and to truly become part of that workforce of the future. So it was incredibly powerful, incredibly successful, really well received by the business. And some of the stats that we got out of it, so over the 4 weeks, we had 110 events. We had over 200 facilitators and hosts. We had an average feedback score of 4.5 out of 5. We had over 6,000 total attendances across the 4 weeks, which out of that point in time, a team of, I think it was 1,200 or 900 at that point in time, Suzanne, was huge. Of that was 750 unique attendances. So those 750 people attended 6,000 events, and we recorded over 7,000 learning hours. And when I joined the business, we hadn't even done 7,000 learning hours in the financial year before. So what we saw was just this incredible desire of our people to actually learn and be part of that future. It was a new way to learn for the business. It was a way for our people to do something a little bit different. And the timing, although it sounds a tad absurd, the timing of COVID actually worked in our favour. And I think if people weren't at home and they were in the office and they were bump into people on the way to a meeting room, they may not have attended. And we may not have seen what we did see in terms of the massive amount of engagement with the program.
Well, it's a fantastic program and it's enormously detailed. I can't believe you pulled off that much stuff in 5 weeks. It's enormous.
Nor can my team, but we were exhausted afterwards, I must say.
Absolutely, I can understand it.
Yeah.
So just to unpack that, you mentioned that you had been tracking learning development hours or there had been some tracking of the hours before this 30-day program. I had a question around whether you'd been able to benchmark the technical skills or the technology skills of the team in any way prior to any of this happening. So it sounds like there was some of that going on, but this has really accelerated anything that was happening previously.
Absolutely. Suzanne, do you want to take this one?
Yeah, so in terms of benchmarking the skills before these events, we had anecdotally, so in pockets of the company, this had been achieved through skills assessments. But the challenge with that is it can often be quite manual and sometimes it's a self-assessment. So individuals may choose to rate themselves differently in a self-assessment to something that's more objective. And what the 30-day development challenge and subsequent events like DevFest and License to Skill, which the team has run since 30-day development challenge, what they've done is they've given us a lot greater clarity on what people are engaging with. So our learning platforms, for example, Pluralsight, do a lot of the behind the scenes reporting, so we can see live what people are doing, when they're doing it, et cetera, and how that relates back to developing future tech skills, growing their capabilities. It's also really interesting. We've also worked with Pluralsight to get reporting that suits us as well. So one thing we'd be mindful of is there's a difference, it turns out, in when males and females learn. So through the Pluralsight reporting, we've been able to see that our male staff spend more hours at the weekends and late at night. Our men are learning 24 hours a day. We can see hour by hour across a 7-day period. And we have people logging on at 2 a.m., 3 a.m. I don't know why to do Pluralsight training, but they are. And what we notice with our females is it's much more likely to be mid-morning on a working day and much less likely to be at weekends or evenings. And so with these events, we can also get a rundown of who's doing what hours when. We've seen that the events that Sheryn has run are well attended by both genders. And so it's great to actually have that data. It's things we never knew before, and it's helped us to make sure we're serving different groups' needs as we've planned these events with that knowledge now as well.
And what's happened since, you mentioned just briefly there a couple of other events, what's happened since the 30-day challenge? And particularly speaking to what Sheryn was talking about, which was around this development of micro habits by people. How much of the ongoing effort is kind of put back on the staff to do or to really enable themselves and their own learning experiences versus how much is still driven by the central technology enablement team?
So what we've done so far, we've had 3 events. 30DDC was a totally new way for our people to experience capability uplift. And what we realized through that was that people had come to the awareness that they needed to take control of their career and their own development. From that, DevFest was born. We have this habit of naming things in quite an unusual way. So DevFest was born, and DevFest was focused on building an understanding and a usage of the available tools for our people to create and incorporate development planning and future tech skill requirements into broader capabilities. So DevFest was a little bit different in that DevFest was very much the onus on the individual. So it was, what is the development need that you have? How are you going to fulfill it? Let us help you and let us help your managers to talk about how you can create powerful, smart dev goals and dev plans across, I think it was 3 weeks as well, DevFest, a 3-week period. And we did like 35 technology team education sessions. Through those, it kind of built not only the knowledge of CapDev, who now I think Suzanne constantly tells us where our team's name checked more than any other team by the CIO because of we're trusted now to get things done, which is fantastic. And I don't know if that would have been the case a couple of years ago. We've got a couple of learning platforms we use. Obviously, Suzanne mentioned Pluralsight. We also have other ones we use, and we saw a 98% allocation of all of the licenses that we've purchased through this, because people saw that they could create their own learning paths in those systems. We had 55 sessions across the 3 weeks on 7 topics, which were, how do you use a people and purpose initiative? How do you become involved? How to set SMART goals, which, it sounds simple, but people don't do it. How do you set a goal for the future? How do you get there? What are the steps you can take? And we also developed what we called the Future Capability Toolkit, which was all about stepping back and really reflecting on what it is that you want to learn, what it is you're passionate about, and where do you think you could take your career moving forward. Again, this was 600 plus attendances, and these were co-hosted and co-run with the business. It wasn't just our team facilitating these at all. We had managers leading the manager coaching courses. We had executive leaders leading the how to develop your team collaboratively sessions, all of those sorts of things. 95% of our users that we surveyed said that they were going to actually implement and use the skills that they developed over the 3-week period. And we had a 304% increase we have a learning platform which we've built internally, or a learning hub called Me at Tech and Ops. And we had a 304% uplift in that for people to access not only DevFest materials, but also the historic 30DDC materials, because what we're starting to do is build a really powerful group of content that is being created and curated for the business to continue to use. So that was incredibly powerful, but we didn't stop there, right? My team doesn't stop there. They like a challenge. And so from DevFest, so that ran in alignment to the IAG development planning process. And we've started to see some figures coming out of that, of completion of dev plans has been incredibly high. Future focused dev goals have been incredibly high. And so from that, we thought, okay, well, beginning of this year, or the last quarter of this year, or the third quarter of this year, there's not a lot on. It's not too busy. We're not going through a reorg or anything like that. What if we did something a bit more gamified, a bit more business takes ownership of it? And if you want to participate, you participate. If you don't, you don't. And the License to Skill program was born. We took a little bit of creative license, and it was all a complete Bond-themed event. So we had things like Diamonds Are Forever, which was focused on our culture, and it was incredibly gamified. We set up 23 challenges, and we set up a hub which had mission control and Q's laboratory and all of these sorts of things on it. And quite frankly, my team, I think, had more fun naming these challenges than anything else. But it wasn't just my team setting up these challenges. In fact, it was actually the business setting up the challenges. So we had robotic process automation challenges. We had what we call Game of Codes, which was coding challenges. We had procurement challenges, ways of working challenges, and all of that was developed by the business. We just hosted the content and helped them get into a challenge-ready state. So we did 23 challenges. For all of tech and ops people, we had, I think, Pluralsight gave us an additional 1,300 temporary licenses to use for a month, because what we wanted to do was to really increase as well our use of skills IQ in the back end of Pluralsight. And what we saw from that was an increase, and I only just got these figures this morning, so I was pretty proud of them. We have seen since December of last year, through the License to Skill Challenge, an 168% increase in our experts. So they are globally recognised experts in categories ranging from cloud to agile to Kubernetes, etc. And we were only aiming for a 75% increase year on year this year, and we've got to 168, which is brilliant. We had something like, I think it was in total, almost 3,000 hours registered in our learning. We had 190 different quizzes which aligned to all of this. A new member of my team, who is absolutely fantastic, built what she called Escape at IAG, and it was a gamified escape room which teams could challenge and do together. And then we had team winners and things like that. And it was just a magnificent event. It was such a fun event. And interestingly, going back to what Suzanne said about when women learn and when men learn, we had a leaderboard on the challenge, skills challenge, and of our top 10 performers across the skills challenge, 8 of those were women. Now, we're still trying to get to the bottom of why women were so attracted to this gamified challenge and so attracted to winning all of these prizes. And we're doing additional surveying, researching, and interviews with people to understand more about it. But we thought that was actually quite a significant amount of women really focused on learning more about the capabilities available to them, really focusing on their future skills and really wanting to be seen and recognised as either an expert or proficient in their skill sets. So that was License to Skill. And all of these have been building up to really start to show that our people are participating in and they want to be part of a performance and learning culture. And it's very evident in what we're seeing from people's feedback, and it's very evident from what we're seeing in relation to the more invitations we're getting as a team to come and help people within the business learn new things, focus on new capabilities, and really grow different skills across the group, which is a very different behaviour than was evident 18 months ago. We'll still go to the main IAG learning teams, but now they trust us to actually know what they need and help them to grow in those areas which are most important to the business to achieve their strategic outcomes.
And what I like about what you were describing there as well is that it shows a progression in the way that technology enablement has set itself up internally. And it really, while it started out around the certifications and the development of the skills, it then moved into more of an applied learning sense, and IAG took a lot more on in terms of really trying to test how much of that skills development had actually stuck and was able to then be applied within perhaps IAG specific challenges.
Absolutely. And that's what we want to show, because I mean, I read somewhere the other night it didn't really apply to learning, but it made me think of learning, and it was something along the lines of knowledge alone is not enough. It has potential, but unless you actually apply it, that knowledge is meaningless. And so what we're seeing from those skills challenges and the quizzes and the skills IQ is the true application of the learning that they have achieved over the period from May, when 30DDC kicked off last year, to now. So we've got, an almost 12-month period, and what we have seen in the behavioural change across the organisation is quite enormous. And I know that both myself and Suzanne are incredibly proud of what we've achieved and what the team has been able to achieve in the past 12 months.
And I think it's important as well, because when you interact with some of these micro-learning platforms and courseware, a lot of them tend to be quite prescriptive in terms of the way that you follow through the process, and you appear to be developing the skills, but it's not necessarily apparent whether you'll be able to apply them in a context outside of that specific courseware. So I think what you're doing is quite interesting in terms of making sure that actually occurs.
Yeah, absolutely. Otherwise, what's the point, really, of actually investing in all of these systems and these learning platforms if not to actually apply the learning and grow the skill and really have a team of technologists and now operational specialists who are the best at what they do and have a career that is solid and has a future within IAG and beyond, don't get me wrong. And what was interesting was, particularly with License to Skill, our new graduates loved it because they're learners. And we had such a competitive, because you could participate as an individual or as a team, and you all got your secret agent names and things like that. So it was quite over the top, but incredibly fun.
I think building on what you just said there, Ryan, about taking the learning and applying it back, that's what's been really important for our senior leaders, and the reporting that Sheryn's done and that the tools, the platforms like Pluralsight have really supported, mean that we're giving individualised reporting back to each of our executive general managers about how much learning their people are doing and what tech skills their people are focusing on. So they can both see, for example, are our people focusing on cloud? Are they focusing on security? Are they focusing on agile? Or is it soft skills? Or is there a gap? Maybe we're expecting them to be doing more security type training and they're not. And likewise with the goals, Sheryn's team has trawled through an Excel spreadsheet with, I think, about 1,600 lines on it, identifying which development goals people are working towards and doing some insights and analysis to say, hey, are they the right development goals? Are they going to get us the future tech skills we need for our future workforce so that we can deliver our strategy? And sometimes we've identified gaps. And because we've had that reporting down to an executive general manager level, it means we can have really targeted follow-up to make sure those gaps are closed as soon as possible, which helps both the individuals grow a career that's relevant in IAG, and it also helps ensure that the leaders can deliver on the commitments they've made to our board and our shareholders and our customers.
And just to go back on this idea of applicable skills, are you able to, or have you looked at whether you can track the application of some of these skills to actual business projects rather than specifically to specific tests that have been designed through the License to Skill program, for example?
Look, it's something that we are working on at the moment. So we're implementing, and we've started it already, but we're now into our second phase of our quarterly survey to the business of, what have you learned in the last, how have you applied it, all of those sorts of things. And we're also in the process of actually developing what we're calling our embedding learning page, which will sit on the Me at Tech and Ops hub. And it's all about how do we embed learning in our team meetings, for example? How do we have conversations, set up learning circles so that as a team we can track and see at what point in time have I applied the skills? What did I learn when I did that? And how can I help educate my colleagues on how to actually apply the learning? So what we're trying to do very much, and there's one of our core values is at IAG, easier together. And what we're trying to show is that social learning impact and that team collaborative learning impact is actually quite substantial when you involve all of the squads, all of the teams, all of the people that you work with on a day-to-day basis, and you share amongst yourselves. So we're not there yet, I will admit that, but we are slowly but surely getting there. And I would say within the next 6 months, we should have far more rigorous data available on that and being able to show that.
Building on what Sheryn said as well, Sheryn's team is very good at getting close to real-time feedback from people who are participating in these events. They're very proactive at making sure whoever attends gives us feedback on what worked and what didn't. And Sheryn can correct me if I'm wrong, but from DevFest, one of the things we asked is whether people will actually apply what they learned. And from memory, 95% of people said that they would apply what they had learned during DevFest. So, that number may or may not quite be right in reality, but it's a really good indication that people are seeing that these skills are relevant for their use on the job. And while these 3 events that Sheryn has talked about are for the whole of Tech and Ops, and we have had a few people from other parts of IAG join in as well, she has worked with some of our strategic programs to do more of an in-depth learning needs analysis around the future tech skills that they need. So Serenity, which is one of our biggest programs of work at the moment, so looking at taking 17 insurance platforms and turning it into one, had a very specific need of skills. And so Sheryn's team worked with some of the senior stakeholders there to identify what tech skills were needed. We had people in the programs identify where they were at in terms of either being low in skill or high in skill, so we could have tailor-made training for that program that was delivered just in time for the team starting work on that, so that we could have a collection of teams that hit the ground running and delivered that program effectively. And it was delivered on time and has gone live now. So it was great to have her team so involved in contributing to that program's success.
Is there anything else that you wanted to get across or you think we've missed?
I wouldn't underestimate, Sheryn's quite modest. And so what I'd like to call out as well is the first time we pitched 30-day development challenge to our senior leaders to get endorsement for it. This is something that had never been done before. And it was a real step into the unknown. And the leaders didn't really know what they were signing up for. We didn't know if it would succeed or not. And we were pitching it in a pre-COVID world, and it got approval and then had to be, as Sheryn said, pivoted to work in a lockdown world. And I'd like to give the leaders credit for taking that leap of faith. And also, it was successful beyond any of our wildest dreams. But it was such a different thing to what any of us had ever done before in any of the companies that we'd worked in. So I think it's worth calling out there, both in terms of the senior leaders and also Sheryn's team, to turn that crazy idea into a reality that people are still talking about. You know, a year later, people still talk about the 30-day development challenge. Now, you think about how much change goes on in an organization across a year, and people have an emotional connection. It's not just about the knowledge. People feel emotionally connected to these events and what they get out of them. And I think that's testament to just how valuable they are.
And that's the podcast for this week. We'll be back with an exciting new interview next week. Until then, you can catch all the latest headlines in Australian IT over at itnews.com.au.